You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Joining us now is House of Delegates member, District 45, Mark Levine from Northern Virginia, and with him is Daphna. Man, I'm going to give it a shot, Daphna. Nachminovich?
You got it.
Daphna Nachminovich. She's Senior Vice President of Cruelty Investigation. I got a much easier time with Levine. Senior Vice President of Cruelty Investigations for PETA, P-E-T-A. If you're not familiar with that organization, go to PETA.com, P-E-T-A. And they're on the line with us now. Mark and Daphna, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
morning.
John.
I'm going to start with Delegate Levine here. Delegate Levine, what is it that got you interested in PETA's cruelty investigations and how they're now relating to a case in Virginia? Can you open up and explain that?
Well, Daphna and I have worked together this year on a really very good tethering bill. Tethering is when you tie an animal, usually a dog, outside. And, of course, you tie a dog outside, it's pretty helpless when it comes to predators or the environment. And we've been working on tethering bills for some years now in the General Assembly. And I dare say that the one that I wrote, along with Senator John Bell, and Daphna helped us with that, as did many others, Matt Ferris, Republicans. It was a bipartisan effort. In any case, I thought it was a really good bill, and we met working on that. And she and others brought to my attention the real cruelty going down in Cumberland County with this in Vigo animal experimentation where they got 5,000 beagles crammed into a real unsanitary facility. We have dogs in their own filth. And there's, the wire mesh that they're on, and the dogs are just really kind of tortured down there. And, of course, this bill, SB 891, that would have stopped that with the governor's amendment to it, that unfortunately was defeated. And so I saw the
Wait
pictures.
a minute. First of all, what when you said there's 5,000 beagles doing this experiment, it's not clean, they're suffering.
Right.
What's the experiment?
It's unclear. They say that it's done, that they raise these 5,000 beagles to allow vets to practice on dogs. I don't know that they need 5,000. It's not clear to me exactly.
Like practicing on dogs, like you would do a rat?
I guess.
Yes.
I mean, I honestly don't know.
Daphna, what is this? 5,000 beagles are in this. What is this, like a dog dissecting camp? What is this?
Well, it's a breeding. It's a commercial breeder of dogs to use for research purposes. And maybe Daphna knows what research they're doing. It's all very shrouded in mystery to me. My point is the facility is terrible to the dogs. But Daphna, do you know what experiments they do?
Yeah, so as Delegate Levine said, this is a breeding compound, and the dogs, while there's no evidence that actual experimentation goes on at the facility in Cumberland County, this is a massive, massive facility that, as of its last federal inspection last August, had 4,795 beagle dogs and puppies and 58 cats, and it sells animals internationally as well as within our state and within the U.S. And it's a private facility, so most of the business aspect of things and the experimentations for which these animals are sold are not made public records. But we have, through some research and looking at papers, know that some of these dogs have been used for painful and deadly experiments, including one where the corneas of dogs' left eyes were wounded to the point of ulceration, another in which dogs were subjected to a 28-day repeated dose oral toxicity test, which involves administering a compound 3 times a day for 28 days to puppies, and then killing those puppies. And then another one we found out about was one in which puppies were injected with steroids, killed, and then dissected. And one thing to note is that most dog use in laboratories is elective. These are curiosity-driven experiments. They are not experiments required by law. They're experiments conducted by people who receive grants to do those experiments, and they don't result in anything useful for humans.
What type of first of all, Daphna Nachminovich, she is joining us here. Daphna, just so everybody knows, she's a senior vice president with PETA's Cruelty Investigations Department. She's working with House of Delegates member Mark Levine. Mark and I don't agree on anything. We do agree, though, on this particular thing. So
I'm glad to hear it, John.
Yeah, so we're going to put those differences aside. What regulations are there for this puppy experimental farm?
There are federal regulations,
go ahead.
but the problem with the federal regulations is there are really very few federal inspectors simply out in the field. You've got about 100 inspectors for some 12,000 some odd places. So, you do the math, you've got more than 100 facilities that each inspector has to monitor in a year. And the last time, Daphna, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the last time they were investigated was 2017, which gives you some idea of how rare these inspections are. And that's the inspection where they found a lot of this cruelty and, there's, really ugly stuff. There's bugs crawling in their food that the dogs are eating. I mean, if you look at the investigation, things that they're tearing the dog's paws. It's just really, it's hard to read, honestly.
It is hard to read.
What are they doing with the cats?
I don't know.
That's a good question. We don't know the answer to that question. We don't know why there were 58 cats as part of their inspection.
Like, why would they, if it's a dog, well, I mean, why do they have 58 cats there? I always get suspicious. Look, I'm a cat guy, as everybody knows. I love my cat. I hang with him. He's my guy, Sammy. I love my cat. I'm a cat guy. I always get suspicious when, I get the dog thing. That's bad enough. I always get suspicious when cats are around because, like, why do they have cats there? Right? I mean, it's a dog farm. All right, so Levine, Delegate Levine, tell me about your bill, SB 891. What did it aim to do?
Okay, well, this wasn't my bill. I want to be very clear about this. I came to this story pretty late. I want to admit that. There was no House bill on this. This was Dave Marsden Senate bill. It really wasn't about this. It was about regulating pet shops. It was a good bill. This kind of got, I don't know if it accidentally wrapped into it. I think it probably was an accident. In changing the language regarding pet shops, suddenly this facility would have been regulated by the state. And so that's great. Again, I hadn't heard of this, I admit it, before a month ago. So I came late to this story. But I'm not on the committees on which this bill was. But when I learned about the story, I jumped into action. And it was too late for this bill, but the governor had put in an amendment to basically fix the bill and regulate this facility. And so I strongly supported that governor's amendment, was going to speak to it. Unfortunately, the amendment was defeated in the Senate, so I never had a chance to do that. And the reason it was defeated is that the facility claims that it will allow inspections, so it didn't need this law. Now, I'm a little skeptical of the voluntary compliance of a facility like this, I must admit. True voluntary compliance is better than none at all, but I think it needs to be included under the law, and I'm committed to fixing that next year. And I actually think Dave Marsden is, too. The facility argued they'd have to shut down if this law passed, this amendment passed.
Wait a minute. Why would they have to? Look, nobody's a bigger small business advocate than I am. But if you're running a puppy mill and you're doing experimentation, and I'm still trying to figure out why they got 58 cats there. I got to get under that one. That's pissing me off.
We should have mentioned the cats sooner, I think.
I mean, it just like why do they? I'm just telling you, it always makes me suspicious when cats are involved in this because they're such easy prey. But let me ask you this: so what were they complaining about? I mean, if they're clean in their operation and they're not doing experiments like you would do on rice and mats, and the food is clean and the facility is clean, why would they object? I would want weight regulation. I would want them to come into my business.
That's right. I think if they had nothing to hide, they wouldn't have fought this amendment tooth and nail, and the amendment would have merely brought them under the definition of commercial dog breeder. There's no question that they're a commercial breeder. They are, in fact, the largest commercial dog breeder in the Commonwealth, but they have escaped state oversight, since their foundation in 1967, believe it or not. This is not a small business. This is a multi-million-dollar business that operates internationally and has facilities all over the country. We're just focusing on this facility because it's in our state and it does have dogs in it, 5,000 of them. And we know from the USDA inspection that conditions in that facility, at least in 2017, were deplorable and would have violated state law. So this particular amendment would have really, if it would have only shut them down if they cut corners with animal welfare. the only what they did in order to bamboozle, I think that the senator here, is that they claimed that the facility would have to shut down because they have more than 50 dogs, and the commercial dog breeding regulations, it requires breeders with more than 50 dogs to get approval from the county. Now, this is Cumberland County.
Right, so they would have had to get local approval as well.
Oh, and
which was not, which you'd think Cumberland County, frankly, given that it is a very big business, would probably be a lot easier to get permission from them than even state authorities. So I think the complaint was without merit, but was their complaint.
This thing stinks to high heaven, Delegate.
I agree
just
with
got to
you,
tell you
John,
that. This thing is very
I'll
troubling.
tell you this. I want you to know I've spoken with some Republicans about this. We can do a bipartisan effort. I think Dave Marsden will join us. We need to regulate this place, and the first session where I can legally put forward a bill to regulate this place, I will.
Did you talk to Senator Stanley about this?
I did not.
Yeah, you need to talk to him.
I talked to a House Republican who I work very closely with on animal things. We're going to work.
I'm going to tell Dave to work with Senator Stanley because he's always been an advocate of pets. But I mean, I'm just you got to be suspicious. Well, the senators that voted, how did this thing get voted down?
Well,
on what grounds? Lobbyists?
The argument was that because of this 30 dog rule, that they couldn't practice their business. Again, if you read the statute, it's quite clear that they could. They just needed local permission as well. It didn't come to me. I was ready to prepare. I was ready to argue about this place in the House, but it was a Senate bill, not a House bill. Many bills are both House and Senate.
Right.
This
was a Senate bill
only. Right.
All right.
And
so this was carried by Marston. Nothing in the House. Dave's bill.
Right. And then Dave was convinced that because they said they would regulate themselves, that they'd let this go until next session. I'm not convinced, and frankly, I think Dave Marsden absolutely means well, and but I think he made the wrong choice here, and I think we can help. I think he will actually join the cause to fix it.
Well, what recourse do we have, Daphna, in the meantime? I mean, that's another 12 months. Actually, this bill wouldn't pass. It wouldn't become law if it passed July 2021. That's like 14 months from now.
Well, we have many challenges with this because SB 891 was actually, meant to promulgate regulations, which now wouldn't be in place until 2022. So, these dogs really cannot wait. So I think 2021 cannot come soon enough, the legislative session. And in the meantime, I think the most valuable thing people can do is talk to their legislators about the fact that they're concerned about this place and they want our state to regulate it.
What is it called? What's it called?
It's called Invigo.
Envigo.
You got it.
Cumberland County. It's just the 5,000 Beagle place. And I should say there are two things we can do. One, we are going to have a special session this summer to go over the budget post-COVID things. I do not know, because it hasn't even been called yet, whether that will be limited in scope to COVID or not. If it's not, then I'll put the bill in then. If it is, then obviously I have to follow whatever the governor sets in special session. But number two, they have promised to allow themselves to be inspected. That was the reason they got past this legislation. So let's keep them to their word, make sure they are inspected frequently, I hope. And if they refuse, then we know that their promise was full of it. And
Daphna, how do we do that?
Well,
how do we do what Delegate Mark Levine just said? Hold them. I mean, if they said they'd allow for a voluntary inspection, how does PETA hold them accountable to that? How do you do that?
Well,
we talk to the governor and make sure the state animal inspector and others get out there and inspect this place.
We're waiting for the legislature. I think Senator Marsden was in touch with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and what I believe is supposed to happen is that there will be a directive for them to inspect. Now, inspecting a facility, this is a factory farm for dogs. If you look at their satellite view on Google, you will see that there are 5, essentially what's used generally to house chickens on a factory farm. There are 5 of those. It's a 330-acre property. This is, an inspection of this magnitude is going to take some time to plan for, and what we really would like to see is a team of veterinary experts inspect, because this is this is not an hour-long visit. This is a very, when you have this many dogs, you want to make sure that you can lay eyes and hands on each and every one of them. and make sure that all of these conditions, which are very clearly inhumane, that were documented by the federal government back in 2017, have been addressed. I mean, we were talking about structural disrepair, sharp wires sticking out, not just filth and waste dripping from upper level to lower level, but things as basic as not being able to keep the animals' food free of mold and rat and mice species and so on. And so these are very basic animal care things. And the only reason this facility has escaped oversight thus far is that when the commercial dog breeding requirements were passed in 2008, a loophole remained in there because nobody knew this place existed. And that's how they've gotten away with this. And now we all know that they're there. The
loophole that had to do with what they're regulating, companion animals. One more thing before we go, I want to say we are all suffering, obviously, in quarantine and so forth because of this COVID virus, which occurred, when you think about it, because of cruelty to animals. At least we think that a wet market in Wuhan, China, where they're stacking one animal above another, apparently a bat over a pangolin. I wasn't there, but as you know, that's what they think where it came from. Because of cruelty to animals, the entire world is suffering right now. And I don't know if that's a karmic lesson or what.
Well, but, apparently that Wuhan laboratory, that State Department officials went out there and warned in cables that it was unsafe. Now, apparently, the experiment on bat viruses that
is a possibility as well. But either way,
either way, look, I don't want to politicize this. Okay, you got 5,000 beagles. Something's wrong here. You guys need to go, Daphna, and be sure there's a thorough investigation. And not having cleanliness, food. It's one thing to say, okay, I got a puppy farm and it's run like crap and the animals are suffering. Okay. I mean, everybody gets greed in business, and so it's bad. But then when you say, well, they're doing experiments, isn't there a law in this country that you can't do experiments on pet animals? I mean, I thought you do experiments on rats and mice.
There is not. It's perfectly legal.
It is perfectly legal to do experiments on dogs.
And cats. Yep, it sure is. Yep.
Why?
It is. Well, that's an excellent question.
Well, it shouldn't be. My view is that unless it's saving a human life, we shouldn't do animal experiments.
I mean, the one thing I will say is that, as I mentioned earlier, is that a lot of these experiments are curiosity-driven. These are not experiments required by law. And there was a bill that died this year, actually a bipartisan effort from Senator Boysko and Senator Stanley to prohibit the selling of animals, of dogs and cats from Virginia for experiments that are not required by federal law or to overseas experimentation, because a lot of these dogs are going to countries where there are no regulations, no laws to keep them even moderately safe. So there was a bill that was continued, and we very much hope that that comes back next year. But also to add to what Delegate Levine said about quarantine, and all of us are suffering in quarantine, I mean, we get to do what we want to do ultimately, right? I mean, we're making a sacrifice for the greater good. These dogs are literally in quarantine in tiny cages their entire lives from birth to death. And
that's
so
just
sad.
I mean, that's just not.
It is
that's not the way.
That's
not the way God made dogs to live. I mean,
no,
that is really sick.
They don't get.
If you watch some of the video, it's kind of hard to watch, to be honest.
I did. I could. Yeah, it's just horrible.
It is horrible.
Let me just ask you, we're almost out of time. I want to get to Daphna for a second. Daphna, last time you were on my show, 2018, we talked about tethering, which I'm also opposed to. What passed this year on the tethering end?
Sure. So thanks to Delegate Levine and Senator John Bell, and this also was bipartisan in the Senate. We finally, after many years of discussions and arguments, and come July 1st, it will be illegal to keep your dog tethered outdoors when it's 85 degrees or hotter, 32 degrees or lower, during storms, hurricanes, and under certain weather conditions. And we also managed, after many arguments, to get the minimum length of the tether from 10 feet to 15 feet, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're on a dog on a chain who has nothing but a tiny patch of dirt to eat, sleep, urinate, and defecate on,
I could never understand, Daphna. I could never understand why you would have a dog and not let it in the house. I mean, what's the purpose? I mean, why would you have a dog out tethered on a chain? I
spend many hours trying to figure that out.
I just why would you put an animal through that? Like, don't have one. right? Go buy a fish and put it in the bowl or something.
Yeah,
I don't know
dogs,
why you would do
dogs
that.
are people animals. They're animals that like to be with people. They're companion animals, man's best friend. When you think of cruelty to an animal that's just full of love,
horrible.
I don't understand
All
it.
right, one more question for you guys, and I got to go. I'm a cat guy. In New York, they passed a bill. This is like my favorite bill ever passed. Okay, on animals, they've outlawed declawing your cat. Outlawed. So if you want to declaw your cat in New York, you can't do that. Now, if you understand cats, declawing a cat is about the most inhumane thing you could possibly do to a cat, right? I mean, it's very painful. If they get outside, they're dead, right? They have nowhere to defend themselves. They can't get up a tree. They can't do anything. Buy a scratchy post. Why do we allow in Virginia people to still declaw their cats when that is about the most inhumane thing you could possibly do?
What a good question.
Thank you.
I totally agree with you, and I think that issue just hasn't come to our General Assembly yet. Kudos to New York. I could not agree more. There's really nothing crueler. It's really just taking away everything that's natural. The cats scratch for a reason, obviously. They mark their territory. They stretch their shoulder muscles. They shed the outer sheath of their claw, and I never understood how that was legal, and that is one of our campaigns. We have not tackled that legislatively yet. It's difficult to get things through the General Assembly, but I would love to have that on the radar if there are legislators who are interested. But you're absolutely right. It should not be legal to do that. And many countries have outlawed it as well.
It's the most inhumane thing you could do if you understand a cat. It's just taking off their front claws. Why? So they don't scratch your fur. Get them a scratchy paw. Why have a cat? It doesn't make any sense. Why do people have pets and then treat them inhumanely?
That's right.
I would never take the claws off my.
No,
yes.
and for those, just so you know too, it's not just taking the claws out. They actually amputate the first digit of every paw.
Oh my God! I don't. It's just.
It causes a lot of issues for the cat behaviorally and psychologically. I used to work at an animal shelter in Chicago, and a lot of the cats we took in were given up because they started urinating outside the pen or biting to compensate for the fact that they knew that they were defenseless.
It's gross. I mean, the whole thing is sick.